Today, the U.S. Senate debating a key issue on the path to passing those dangerous trade deals we've talked so much about on this program, the Trade Adjustment Assistance Amendment. Get a load of this, my friends, or TAA, would authorize, you can't make it up, would authorize millions in federal money to be paid to U.S. workers displaced by free trade agreements being sold as job creators. It's not funny. Senate Democrats say they will not re-up those deals with Colombia, Panama, and South Korea without a plan to pay off the workers who would lose their jobs in the job-creating free trade agreements sold to us by our president and Republicans. The debate is set to resume within the hour. Thank God for that. Is it me, or does the fact that they are considering an amendment to basically pay off workers losing their jobs for these trade deals acknowledge that they would kill at least some U.S. jobs and fail to acknowledge the banking secrecy, union murder rate, and funding of North Korea through South Korean employers in these trade deals? All of this is taking place as the Obama administration is now also pushing for a little talked about free trade agreement with the entire Trans-Pacific region. No talk of dealing with currency or tax law, just trade deals. The U.S. has been in talks with world leaders for months over the structure of the deal. Such a deal, by the way, could be spectacular for everybody. But the nature of the trade rigging in our own legislature takes something that could be a great tool and makes it into a weapon of extraction from our own country. So far, details are slim, but those familiar with these talks report the general outline looks a lot like NAFTA. And that worked awfully well for job creation in our country, didn't it? Joining us now, Democratic Congresswoman Louise Slaughter from New York, who has stepped out on her own and is touting her own legislation to stop the rigged trade. And Congresswoman, it's a pleasure. Well, let's be very clear. Trade is a tool. It's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just a thing. It's a hammer. You can make it good or bad. You seem to be one of the few people willing to step out and acknowledge that trade can be good, but only if it has rules.
You know, the tragedy and what's happened here is that the trade agreements that the United States has entered since the Second World War have disadvantaged our workers and our country. And you know, almost every innovative thing happening in the world now is invented by Americans. We have the best workforce in the world, but the government treats them very poorly. Now, I think I've got the answer, Dylan. I want to say that any trade agreement we sign with any country has to open that country to American goods. It's tit for tat. They come in here and trade in the biggest market in the world where they want to be, and we go in there and trade. It could prevent American corporations from having to go overseas to sell their goods. And the best part of it, it is enforceable, and we require that the trade representative look at what we call the benign barriers, the things like the automobile manufacturers that told me that oftentimes that they were told that the bumper was too low or the light was in the wrong side, and all kinds of artificial things that they threw up to keep them from trying to keep selling American cars. This would all be gone. It is totally enforceable, which is the best thing because we don't enforce anything.
So let me ask you about a couple of my biggest concerns that exist in current trade. One, in 1994, China rigged their currency at a 50% discount to the U.S. dollar. We have been suffering the effects of that since 1994.
Right.
Secondarily, China taxes American imports to China at 25%. We tax Chinese imports to America at 2.5%. How would your piece of proposed legislation address those two problems?
Well, they would have to stop that because that's an unfair practice.
So how would that happen?
Either the corporations who are aggrieved or Congress could bring unfair practices against that country and stop trade until it is addressed.
It's the first
time we have ever said we are going to enforce this, and the American worker is going to be benefited by the fact that their government is standing up for them. We can't call ourselves a superpower when we don't make anything. If we have to depend on another country to provide everything we use, including everything in our military machines, we haven't made any electronic components in years. We need to get back to manufacturing here, or we have no way to save this country. And I think it's absolutely, we've got some corporations that are supporting this, I want you to know. And I can say something that not many of my colleagues can. I've got a Republican co-sponsor, bipartisan.
Here's my question for you, Congresswoman.
Okay.
There's been a tremendous effort each year for the Treasury Department to classify China as a currency manipulator in order to open the door for legislative engagement with China.
Yes.
You talk about how your legislation will somehow create an enforcement mechanism.
Yes.
I'm curious why I should believe that this legislative enforcement mechanism is any more likely to get invoked than any other mechanism when there is so much special interest money that is making so much money in the United States, from Caterpillar to Cummins Engine to John Deere, who are funding those who would seek to have you not enforce these rules.
But I'm telling you, Dylan, one of the things that's happened now, I talked to Caterpillar today. I'm hoping they'll join us on this bill. They don't have a whole lot of options, Dylan.
They
don't have any way to get in there and trade. We level that field, that playing field, so that the American producer and the American worker has the same chance that we're giving them to come into our country.
I'm confused about enforcement. I understand the rationale. I've been yelling about it for years.
Well,
I've been watching our legislator refuse to enforce it for as long as I've been watching the extraction. And so I'm just trying to figure out why I should believe yours will enforce it when so many other promises to enforce it have never happened. Why does yours have teeth?
Because we have avenues to go. We're not going to wait for the Treasury Department to do something. Congress can do it. Members of Congress can do it.
So this lets you bypass Treasury.
It's different. Absolutely.
Got it.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you that one of the most important things I think that we need to do is to understand here that we have been had, and in China, for example, I've been watching what they're doing with the new car, the Volt. They subsidize that to the tune of $19,000. Now, that's against all trade agreements to subsidize that. But I was disappointed to see in the Times today, about a week ago, the Times wrote that General Motors was not going to give them the technology. They were going to stand up to them. But they've capitulated now, and they're going to have a Chinese partner, just like all the companies from my district have, and the Chinese partner calls all the shots, and they will get the technology. I mean, we just give ourselves away, and we've got to stop it.
I get it.
No more.
Listen.
You know, Korea particularly bothers me because of 36,000 troops on the DMZ that have been there for 60 years looking north while we could do that electronically, and we're obliged to protect them if anybody attacks them. But we can't go in there and trade. Nonsense.
I could not agree more. The only thing that I'm obviously, my skepticism is on enforcement, and you have my pledge to certainly give you as much coverage as I can. And I wish you the best of luck with the enforcement, specifically with the Chinese currency rigging and the tax code, Congresswoman. Thank you.
I'm telling you, my name is Slaughter because I don't give up. I'm staying with this. We're going to get this passed. This is going to become the law of the land. It may not take right away, but I've got the patience to get this done. I can't imagine anybody in the United States, in the Congress of the United States, say they don't believe that we should, for the change, have fair trade, not just free trade.
I hope they're quaking in their boots, and if they're not now, I hope they are soon.
Okay. Thank you so much for the time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Congresswoman Louise Slaughter out of New York. Wonderful rhetoric from her on enforcement, Christian. We have watched this political rhetoric wrapped around in our media sphere and our politicians' mouths for many years now. And every year the Treasury Department has a chance to engage and enforce, and every year the Treasury Department does not engage and does not enforce. That's not just an indictment of Tim Geithner. That's a whole succession of Treasury secretaries that never want to do that. At the end of the day, is a legislative threat like this going to be viable?
So I'm actually going to go against the premise of the question, Dylan, because you know I love you.
Yeah, of course.
But I'm a free trader.
No, hold on. Let's stop there then. So define free. So you believe in free trade with rigged currency and rigged tax code. Is that correct?
No, I believe in free trade with fair rules of the game, which I think we all would.
So does she. That's what she said as well.
I don't think
but she's saying we need...
No, but just hang on 1 minute. I don't think that the U.S. right now, the suffering in the U.S. economy and of the U.S. middle class is chiefly because the U.S. is on the losing end of trade deals.
I never said that.
I think that overall the U.S. has benefited hugely from the opening of global markets since the Second World War. That's one of the reasons
how do you
that
quantify
there has been...
So to that end, how do you quantify the cost of the 50 million in poverty, 22% of our children who do not have food, who do not have functionality, 20% of... So in other words, or maybe the benefits have gone to some, and then annihilation has gone to 150 million people who needs them. Right? Is that the plan?
No, I think it's
so
a little
30
more
million come out well.
Free trade has made consumer goods cheaper for everybody. That's not insignificant.
It is significant if the way you got the cheaper goods was by indebting your country by trillions of dollars while simultaneously destroying the long-term viability of your production infrastructure while supplying the marketplace with crappy disposable product.
I don't think that the inflation of consumer credit in the U.S. is the fault of the countries with whom the U.S. trades. And I would point to Germany, which is a country that believes in trade and is an export-driven economy. What Germany has done differently from the U.S. isn't its attitude towards trade, it's its attitude towards domestic manufacturing and towards education and workers.
How does Germany feel about...
Germany exports to China. Germany exports high-value goods to China. The U.S. could do that, too.
You're not answering my question. So how does Germany feel? How would Germany feel, just for the fun of it, if the U.S. discounted its dollar at 50% below whatever Germany's currency was and taxed its imports at 25%, and theirs at 2.5%? That's free trade, right?
I'm with you, Dylan, on the Chinese currency, although actually...
What about the tax code? What about intellectual property
theft? Hang on. On the Chinese currency, I'm with you, but I do think we're actually seeing steady progress on that. And the losers in the Chinese, U.S., and Euro have been actually... The Euro countries are losing out because the renminbi has been appreciating about 10%.
I just take issue with those who argue free trade while rigging the game behind. Just kind of it pisses me off. I think it's a weaselly move.
It's quite hard. It's quite hard to do anything about China. You have to admit, with all the debt that China holds.
China's debt was to finance American consumption of Chinese imports. It's the dumbest scheme ever invented.
It may be dumb, but that is the current situation. And also, bearing in mind what's happening with inflation in China at the moment, then things are going towards America's favor with the currency.
And remember when I said, when we were talking about Middle East peace and what the president was trying to do vis-a-vis Israel and the Palestinians and how the layers of hypocrisy, and you have to watch it like a chess game? Yeah. Same thing here.
Exactly.
You can talk all you want about enforcement and opening markets and things like that, but there's a reason.
Free trade.
But there's a reason why administration after administration after administration hasn't done what you say that they should do.
Right.
And it's because if you turn the screws on China, it probably turns the screws on the United States in another area. So that's why, I wish Congresswoman Slaughter a lot of luck. I love her. We have known her for a long time. But let's also remember, she's a Democrat. She's in the minority. Republicans run the House. I'm not sure where her bill's going to go.
Well, the biggest place, obviously, the screws get turned if you do this is all the campaign fundraising from all the beneficiaries of trade that people like Louise Slaughter will then be targeted with by super PACs and annihilated because money controls a political conversation, right? I mean, that's really what we're talking about. It's not really, we pretend it's a democracy because we want to feel better. Anyway, it's a pleasure to have you guys here.